I'd like to welcome you all here to our town forum to talk about the New York State Property Tax Freeze program and the impact that it has on our local governments and the way we can do business differently in the state of New York so that our residents can all participate in this tax-free program. And I'd like to thank Linda Puglisi, our town supervisor in the town of Cortland, for allowing us to have the event here. And I'm going to have her come up in just a minute to talk about some of the things that they are doing in Cortland. But I'm also pleased to have other people in the audience who are elected officials, professionals in the field, and the public to get ideas about what can happen in their communities. And I'm also very pleased that Didi Skazafava is here, who's the Deputy Secretary for Local Government Services at the New York Department of State. And Didi had been a colleague of mine in the New York State Assembly for many, many years. And also Mark Patterson, one of her colleagues, who's at the end of the table over here, and Carl Ublacher, who is also here today. And we're going to hear from all three of them. As you know, we passed our fourth on-time budget, and I get so excited because we had so many years with late budgets that it's wonderful to have the experience of on-time budgets. And but within that, we did include property tax reductions, and we stated that if our school districts this year stayed within the property tax cap that was apportioned to them, that the state of New York will come in and pay the difference in our taxes from last year to any increases this year if the school budget's passed. And I think throughout the state there were just a few that didn't, and all of our school budgets did pass. They all stayed within the tax cap, so there will be a check coming to the residents of our community later on this fall to cover that portion of the property tax freeze program. The next part of it is with our local governments, and most of them, they will be doing their budgets in November, December, and if they stay within the tax cap, there will also be return to the taxpayers of anything that is an increase in taxes, but within the tax cap. So we have the two different programs for the first year. But the second year is different, and in the second year, both our schools and our local municipalities have to keep within the tax cap and also prepare for a 1% cut in their spending, 1% over 3 years cut in their spending in order to be able to then have their taxpayers again receive some additional monies from the state. So there's a big effort here, as you can see, for us to learn to share services, coordinate our programs, consolidate services or consolidate governments or whatever. But there's a real effort to trying to lower our costs. We live in a very high-cost county or counties, and we're in a very high-cost state, and so we're taking great efforts to make these changes. So working together, we can get that done. There have been a lot of examples of coordinated services in our communities, and I'd like to ask Linda Puglisi, who's town supervisor of Cortland, to come up and talk about maybe just briefly some of the things that she's done in Cortland over the last number of years, but also what she's working on right now today.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and the working word is brief. Did you want the 2-hour version or the 2-minute version? Okay. Sandy and I have known each other for years, so she knows that I can go on. First of all, I want to begin by thanking Assemblywoman Gala so very much for being here today and hosting these very important forums for our communities. Sandy has been a champion as our Assemblywoman in having on-time budgets. I can remember many years ago when you were talking about it, and that's been extremely important. And also about sharing services, and we have that in common. I've had the honor of being town supervisor for 23 years, and my first year as the elected town supervisor, there was an important report that was done in Westchester County. You know of it, Sandy, the Westchester 2000 report. And that was all about communities, school districts coming together to save taxpayers money and for sharing services. And so we immediately, in our town government, we started to do that. And over the years, we have saved our taxpayers approximately $20 million by doing things collectively. If we have a mandate, sometimes they're unfunded mandates, to filter our water, for example, we got together with our adjacent municipalities, Town of Yorktown, Town of Somers, and we put together our own water filtration plant to filter the water. We saved ourselves together about $8 million by building the new plant and having interconnects for filtered water. So that's one example. We also had a very innovative idea in Cortland to have a new police plan. So we contracted with the Westchester County Police and the New York State Police, and we had a very, very small town police department, and some of them were injured going out on workman's comp, and so we helped to find them jobs elsewhere. The small local police department of about 10 officers, and we contracted with Westchester County Police, and of course the New York State Police were here. That has saved us since 1999 over $1 million a year, just that shared service by itself, Sandy. And we've done other things. Our paramedics, we've done that in shared services. We've done that with about 4 or 5 other communities, and that has also benefited our taxpayers by collectively having that shared service. One other example was recycling. We did have an unfunded mandate back in 1992 to start recycling programs, so critical for the environment. And if we just did it by ourselves and had to take our sanitation trucks down to the southern part of Westchester County, it would have cost us a lot of money and time and labor and on our vehicles, wear and tear on the vehicles. So we got together in the northern part of Westchester and we started a coalition, about 7 municipalities, and we have worked with Westchester County. So we have the land, we have a transfer station. Westchester County comes, picks up the recyclables. They then take it down to southern Westchester County to their facility. So that's saved us a lot of money, and the list goes on of what can be done. And now, currently, just recently, myself and one of my colleagues on the town board, Seth Freach, and I, we've started a brand new shared service task force in town to work towards the goal of the property tax freeze and keeping within the cap, which we've done ever since it was started and voted on by the state legislature, signed by the governor. But we're working, the task force includes the town of Cortland, our 2 villages, Buchanan and Croton-on-Hudson, and our 3 school districts. And ultimately, we will branch out to Westchester County and other entities to save you taxpayers money so that we can abide by the property tax freeze for our taxpayers, continue to share services, and to consolidate whenever possible. But to have intermunicipal agreements, that is a vehicle to be able to do these shared services legally. It's very important. The lawyers get involved. So it can be done. Just briefly, I'm just giving you the overview of what we've done in the past to save over $20 million over the years for our taxpayers, to keep our town taxes low, which has been a priority of mine, of ours, over the years. And there's more to do. And we've had one or two of our meetings already. We have a whole list of things that we're going to be thinking of and working on, sharing employees, sharing vehicles, purchasing together. All kinds of things can be accomplished. I'm looking forward to the future as we talk about the things that we've accomplished in the past. And Sandy, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Well, the town of Cortland is certainly an example of a community that's really been working on this for quite some time. And what we're going to do today is to learn about different things that are going on around the state of New York that can be used here as an example of ways that we can share services and coordinate the programs that we have in our communities. And I'm going to ask Dee Dee Skazafava to come up first, Deputy Secretary for Local Government Services at the New York Department of State, to give us an overview, and we'll have some wonderful videos above.
Thank you, Sandy. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. First of all, I'd like to thank my former colleague, Assemblywoman Galiff, for inviting us to be here today. I had the pleasure of working with Sandy for my 12 years that I was in the state legislature, and you have a true champion as far as government efficiency, as far as government transparency. It was a pleasure to work with her for those years, and she was a champion for all these causes for her entire duration of her career in the legislature. So thank you for having us here today, Sandy. Town Supervisor, I hope I get your last name. With a name like Skazafava, I should be able to pronounce any. It's Puglisi? Hey, yay. I'd like to congratulate you for all of the projects that you had the vision to undertake. I too, was a former mayor of a small community, 4,500 people in St. Lawrence County, the village of Gouverneur. And I know sometimes it's difficult to get everybody on the same page. You're dealing with a much larger township, but congratulations for the vision that you've been able to have and the leadership that you've provided in your town, and giving those examples of how government can work together efficiently and effectively. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit of an overview. I'm going to provide an overview of the Department of State. The Department of State is an eclectic type of state agency. We do everything from cemeteries to licensing, giving beauty licenses, to real estate licenses, to code enforcement. The Department of State really interacts with citizens on a daily basis in all communities throughout New York State. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different programs that are available at the Department of State. Then we're going to drill down a little bit, and the Director of Local Government Services, Mark Pattison, is going to talk more specifically about some of the programs that are within that division. Then we're going to get into sharing a few examples throughout the state, even though there's some great examples that have already been presented here today, and maybe we should include some of those in our slideshow as well. But we're going to talk about some ideas that are going on in other parts of the state, and maybe they can apply to you, maybe they don't. But we'll have that dialogue, and we can go from there. Governor Cuomo has done a lot of things at the state, and when we look at the way the regional economic development councils are currently functioning, it's exciting because it's grassroots. It's citizens that are making decisions about the destiny of each of their regions, deciding priority projects, how to develop your own economy, knowing your own resources, knowing your own strengths, and how you want to develop them, not looking to Albany to tell you what to do, but you having a plan for the future. How does the Department of State interact with that? There's several ways. When we look at the regional economy and regional economies of different areas, we can break it down. It's not just about corporations and businesses. It's about the business climate. And local governments play a very important role. And I don't have to tell you about making sure the infrastructure is in place to support development, making sure that government is functioning in a way that different entities can have confidence that there's going to be stability in local governments, that they can depend on a certain type of structure. So local governments really play an important role in economic development. And there's a sense that there's all these pieces of the puzzle that have to come together in order to have any sort of strong economy and good quality of life in different communities. Different tools that have been put into place to help communities that are struggling. One thing is the Financial Restructuring Board for local governments. That's a new tool that was put in place by the legislature and the governor last year. in order to provide for local governments that are distressed to have a venue that they can go before the state and get assistance from a number of agencies to try to come up with a blueprint of a plan. It's not something that a local government has to take advantage of, but it is for communities that are distressed. It provides you expertise. Yeah, you have to be willing to open your books, so to speak, which all books are open anyways, they're open to the comptroller, they're open to other local governments, it's public knowledge, but you have to be willing to have an open dialogue, and that gives you an idea of the makeup of that financial restructuring board. And what that financial restructuring board does is come up with suggestions on how governments might reorganize or perhaps function more effectively. And if a municipality is willing to do that and go forward with a plan that's put forth by the restructuring board, then there's financing that comes along with it, with a goal of trying to restore some sort of stability to communities that are determined to be in distress, according to the comptroller. This is really the goal of the Department of State, and you can read that right there. New Yorkers have tremendous natural and historic resources that we can and must capitalize on. While we are just one agency or program cannot meet all of today's economic challenges, together we can leverage our assets to create stronger and more vibrant neighborhoods. The Department of State is committed to helping local governments become more effective, efficient, and sustainable. I invite you to partner with us so together we can make a real difference. And that's from our Secretary of State, Cesar Perales. Whether we're talking about corporate licensing or the Division of Local Governments or the Code Enforcement Division or cemeteries, it's our job to try to assist you to make sure that communities are vibrant and you have the information and the technical resources that you need to do that. This gives you a little bit of an overview of some of the department's divisions. You have local government services, you have corporations. All corporations go through for their licensing in the state of New York, miscellaneous records, local waterfront revitalization. You've seen a lot of activity in the Hudson Valley with local waterfront revitalization. That's a very active program throughout the state. You have the Office of New Americans, cemeteries, licensing, boxing, corporations, Superstorm Sandy, New York Rising efforts, the Office of Building Codes, and Consumer Protection. So those are a lot of different divisions, but like I said before, all of those divisions really interface with many of your citizens on a daily basis. New York Department of State, the other thing that happened with regional economic development councils is, I can give you an example, and I've given this example in other places that I've spoken with. I had, during my time in the state legislature, I had one case in particular where someone tried to do the right thing. They called one state agency and asked how to handle a certain situation. They were given instructions and they followed that advice, only to be fined by another state agency. So you had someone that was trying to do the right thing, got advice, followed the advice, and then got fined by another state agency. What has happened and this was many years ago, what's happened under the Regional Economic Development Councils is you have not only streamlining of state agencies, but you have the networking amongst state agencies. So if you have a situation, there are regional teams that are assigned to various regions throughout the state. People from DOT, Department of Health, Department of State, Environmental Conservation. You have people that are keyed into the different regions, and they work together in partnership. So instead of an entity coming into a community and have to meet perhaps 8 or 9 different times with different state agencies, you can have everyone working with a team of state agencies at one time. And it really promotes economic activity. It promotes working more effectively, having better communication, which really sets a better example for anyone that's looking perhaps to locate in your community. Other things we do at the Department of State, training for local government officials. Many people that serve on zoning and planning boards, big responsibilities. They're kind of the gatekeeper to your community for many different things. Those are volunteer positions in many communities, but they're very important. And it's important that people are trained. I've had some examples in certain communities that certain projects have been held up for months and months and months. And it's not because anyone was willfully doing it. It just was because some people at some times didn't understand the responsibilities that went along with the role. And at times it was difficult to get a quorum. This is in some of the smaller communities. So what we try to do at the Department of State is make sure that people have the proper training for planning boards and zoning boards, that if there's changes, like there recently was a change in the seeker law, that board members are aware of changes. We go out to many communities in public forums and provide the training. We also have online training that's accessible for people because we understand that it's not always possible to attend all these sessions, and we want to encourage people to become, involved in their communities, and sometimes it means finding ways for them to access the information that they need to access in easy ways. So we are providing training online as well as in person. A lot of people like the in-person because with zoning and planning, it's not always black and white. There are questions. People like the exchange that can occur face to face. So we do, I think, how many training sessions have we been on the road for?
About 8,000 people a year.
So we do a lot of work in that area as well. How we help? State agency networking. We work with Environmental Facilities Corporation, Department of Transportation, State Ed Department, Homes and Community Renewal, Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Health. I mean, we work with all the other state agencies.